Great. Cool. We'll just get that presentation up. Kia ora to you both. Thank you. Just want to hit the microphone button. There you go.
Good morning.
You can head off on the presentation. Thank you.
Cool. Kia ora. So my name is Katie Auckram and I'm a policy planner from Planning and Resource Consents. I'm going to be talking about on-site wastewater today. So this report seeks approval to prepare a council-initiated plan change to the Auckland Unitary Plan to address issues with the provisions for on-site wastewater management. If approved, the plan change preparation will occur over the next few months, including stakeholder engagement, and the draft plan change would then be brought back before the committee to seek approval to notify the plan change. So on-site wastewater systems provide wastewater treatment and disposal for properties within the region not serviced by a wastewater network. These systems have the potential to impact water quality, public health, and the region's amenity values through system failures and poor performance. There's approximately 48,000 systems in Auckland. Rules for on-site wastewater are in Chapter E5 of the Unitary Plan. Most systems operate as a permitted activity under the plan, and compliance with the permitted activity standards is therefore essential to the Unitary Plan effectively achieving its intended outcomes. And Council has recently developed the Safe Septic Compliance Program for on-site wastewater funded by the Water Quality Targeted Rate. So 3 key issues have been identified with the Unitary Plan provisions for on-site wastewater management. Number 1 is references to outdated technical information. Chapter E5 refers to the outdated guidance TP58, which was published in 2004. Council has since produced new guidance for on-site wastewater management, referred to as GDO6. Updating Chapter E5 to reflect GDO6 will provide more clarity in the permitted activity standards for on-site wastewater system design and improve the efficiency of the consenting process for council staff and applicants. It will also ensure that new systems are designed to current best practice. Issue number 2 is improving the operation and maintenance standards to support compliance monitoring. Issues and opportunities to improve the standards have been identified. For example, Chapter E5 requires that owners retain and make their maintenance records available on-site for inspection. This is inconsistent with the more efficient compliance monitoring approach, requesting that owners send their maintenance records to the council. Healthy Waters and Flood Resilience and compliance staff have noted that the current Unitary Plan wording has created debates and inefficiency with some on-site system owners. And the third issue is clarifying how upgrades of existing systems are managed. So Chapter E5 provides for existing discharges that were a permitted activity prior to the Unitary Plan to continue as a permitted activity. It's not clear, however, to what extent system upgrades can be undertaken as a permitted activity, and the cost of a resource consent can deter owners from undertaking upgrade works. Consideration is being given on how to clarify this rule and support property owners who would like to upgrade their system, but who might not meet the standards for new systems. So changes to Chapter E5 were going to be included in the freshwater plan change required to implement the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management. However, central government is revising the NPSFM and the deadline for notifying this plan change has been extended to the end of 2027. An on-site wastewater plan change could be notified in advance of the NPSFM plan change. So 3 options were identified for plan change timing and notification. Option 1 is to undertake a discrete on-site wastewater plan change in advance of the NPSFM plan change with notification to directly affected parties by post. This option has a financial cost for the council for plan change notification and hearings, estimated at $220,000. These costs can be managed within the overall NPSFM budget. Notification by post is a robust notification process that meets the legal requirements of the RMA and ensures that property owners are informed of their ability to make a submission. Undertaking an on-site wastewater plan change will mean that the inefficiencies with the existing provisions impacting consenting and compliance are addressed earlier. So this is good for the efficiency of council operations, and consequential improvements for freshwater and coastal waters are also delivered sooner. Option 2 is similar to option 1, but without notification to directly affected parties by post. There will be a reputational and legal risk to the council for not undertaking a robust notification process that meets the legal requirements of the RMA. And option 3 is to incorporate changes to Chapter E5 in the MPSFM plan change in 2027. The notification process for this plan change is still to be determined. So there's no additional financial cost to the council if the on-site wastewater changes are included in the 2027 MPSFM plan change. Notification of this plan change is unlikely to be by post, so the reputational risk of not undertaking a robust notification process remains. Option 3 means that there will be a delay in addressing inefficiencies with the existing provisions impacting consenting and compliance, and Healthy Water staff feel that a delay in improvements to the operation and maintenance standards has a reputational risk for the Safe Septic compliance program. There's also a risk of further delays if the MPSFM program is delayed due to central government's revision of the MPSFM, or if the MPSFM plan change has a lengthy hearings process. And there will also be a delay in achieving consequential improvements for freshwater and coastal waters. So option 1 is the recommended option. It provides for a timely resolution of the operational issues of Chapter E5, it provides a robust notification process which meets the legal requirements of the RMA and ensures that property owners feel properly consulted, and it delivers consequential benefits for freshwater sooner. Option 1 supports the Safe Septic compliance work that is underway. It also supports implementation of Council's new guidance, GDO 6. Ultimately, the plan change will provide for the alignment of the unitary plan with Council's guidance and Council's compliance practices. This option has the higher financial cost, however, the costs can be managed within the MPSFM budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. You make complicated things much easier to understand, so we appreciate it. Just before we move to questions, I need to move for Councillor Williamson has had to leave so he can go online. Councillor Stewart, I moved it, but Councillor Stewart, did you want a second? Right. All those in favour? Any opposed? No. Thank you. Sorry about that. We'll go to questions. First up, Deputy Mayor.
Thanks very much for your paper. Look, I don't often learn more from the multi-impact statement than I do from the main paper, but I have in this case. I suppose this is, from my perspective, a lot of a regulatory kind of process that you're going through. But could you explain it in a little bit more detail? You know, what are the things that you're seeing that are really bad? You know, to quote the mayor, you know, what are the problem you're trying to solve? Is it the fact that you're getting a whole lot more of dumping waste into the water, so therefore you want a regulatory change? I mean, what are the, in the issue stuff, you don't really talk about that directly, but you do in the multi-impact stuff. So I'm just kind of keen for you to frame up why this is such an issue. I want to support it, I'd love to move it, you know, anything that makes it better. But I just want you to clearly articulate what is the real problem here.
The problem that we are trying to address is contamination of waterways from on-site systems. The best way of doing that is ensuring that they're maintained and upgraded. And the purpose of this plan change is to ensure that they are being maintained and upgraded in accordance with our latest technical guidance, not with guidance that was developed in 2004. So in some ways it's just an administrative technical matter that we're making sure the unitary plan is staying up to date with what we're currently doing in practice, what our monitoring officers and the program under the targeted rate are going out asking people to do.
Brilliant, that's what I wanted to hear. Thank you so much.
That makes it clear.
Easy, and Deputy Mayor, you've moved, and I think Deputy Chair wanted a second. Councillor Walker.
Sure, so I've got a question. Just by way of background, I've been taking an interest in TP58 and GDO 6 for the last, 30 odd years. I knew Ian Gunn, who put together TP. 58. I don't think he's around anymore, if I recollect. Anyway, the concern that I've got by way of question goes like this. So, yes, you've got on-site wastewater systems in rural areas, but equally under the Building Act, things like composting toilets, grey water recycling, and so on, and I could generate a large list, can be all acceptable solutions under the Building Act. Increasingly, there are technologies whereby you can be off the grid in terms of your power, you can be off the grid in terms of water, you can be off the grid in terms of sewage. And often those systems now are better than reticulated systems that discharge into the ocean. Now, TP58 and GDO6 are the reference for people that want to put those systems in. And other councils around New Zealand look to TP58 and GDO6 because we're the lead. So the question that I'm raising is, are we updating and addressing these issues so that we're actually enhancing the ability of someone to recycle their grey water? For example, there are systems to recycle your shower water into the toilet and so on. Composting toilets have come a long way. There are incineration toilets and so on. So is this process enabling that?
So that is one of the reasons why it would be good to update the references from TP58 to GDO6. It's got a more comprehensive coverage of the full range of systems that are appropriate and the matters that should be considered when designing and installing and maintaining those systems. That's another thing that we want to change in the standards within the unitary plan themselves. At the moment, the maintenance requirements refer to primary systems and secondary systems and cause quite a bit of confusion for those sort of newer systems about which standard they are meant to comply with. And so if we could tweak some of that a bit about the full range of systems that are appropriate, it would be more comprehensive and clearer for everyone with the alternative systems as well.
So just to be clear, we're going to be covering off urban situations as well as rural situations.
Yes, this will apply where someone is trying to put in an on-site system,
Okay,
irrespective of whether they have the network or not.
all right. The other related question I just want to raise is we have a situation right now on the Hibiscus Coast, other parts of Auckland, where we're rapidly going to be having a situation where people will not be able to connect to reticulated areas because we don't have the capacity. And this is happening in multiple locations around Auckland. So my concern that goes to this is, will this update enhance a situation whereby somebody in an urban setting that wants to achieve a consent, build a house, put in a toilet, is able to do that more efficiently, effectively and economically than what they can now?
It will depend on their site size and their geology. So they would still have to meet the requirements that are in the unitary plan and in GDO6. It will be clearer for them about what they have to comply with. But if their sites are not large enough, they would need a resource consent process.
So, in a situation where the site size is not relevant, because let's say it's a composting toilet, it's a waterless toilet,
Yep.
Are we moving to a situation where enabling that in a situation where they're able to, let's say, recycle all of their grey water so that there's a minimal requirement there, so they can effectively be off-grid? Are we enabling that?
Do you think it's enabled anymore then? I'm not sure. We're not entirely sure. It would depend on the system. At the least, we'll be a lot clearer about whether they are enabled or not.
Okay, so through you, Mr. Chair, I just want to signal that this is an incredibly important issue for a number of people around Auckland. It goes to meeting our obligations around climate change, reducing emissions, and so on. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Foley.
Kia ora, thanks Chair and thanks team. I just wanted to ask for more of a detailed explanation on what the robust notification process is. mindful that, you know, you can do the minimum and you can do the letter drops, but we know letter drops don't reach all of our community, our Māori, our Pacific, our ethnic communities, for example. So could you explain that a little bit better? Kia ora.
So the notification process under option 1 is to send letters to property owners with on-site wastewater systems. And that's compared to option 2, which would just be to have the public notice in council's publications like Our Auckland.
So we know that you would reach a lot more people by sending them a letter on site. If they are the property owner, they're more likely to get the mail and read it. So it's a better option than just doing articles in Our Auckland or ads at the back of the newspaper. If we feel there's a need for further communication, we could do that as well. You can put out articles and stories and flyers and Facebook articles with the local boards. So that would be in addition to this. The letter is part of meeting the basic statutory requirement, which is to send a copy of the public notice to every directly affected person.
Kia ora. I support option 1, but I do think we know, based on evidence and our past dealings with people, that a letter drop usually isn't sufficient. So I'd encourage you to do more if you can, to encourage and include the local boards in getting the word out, and emails even, because I know I don't even check the letterbox, maybe once a month, if that.
Yeah.
Kia ora. Thank you.
Kia ora. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Filipaina. All right. Councillor Turner.
Thank you. He was
One
putting.
last one now, too, if that's okay.
When council designs these rules and requirements, do we take into consideration the cost implication on the people?
Definitely. So that's one of the requirements in the RMA, that we always undertake a cost-benefit analysis of any plan change.
So, you know, we've got the modern tank system getting up to $45,000 in cost. We've got situations that I'm helping with where, after engineering intervention by specialists, and the arguments placed, the people have been able to go back to the old-fashioned just two tank system. The only difference to the old-fashioned one is a dripper, line, evaporator lines rather than drainage. I have a job I'm helping with in Piha where the person's just had. We have to renew our consents now regularly. The person's just renewed their consent at a cost of $12,000 with no intervention, no practical intervention on the ground. Cost $12,000 to say, yeah, you're great to go again. And I also have a situation where a certifying drain layer of 54 years of age and 30 years in business has just had his certification for his tank denied because of conflict of interest. He's been able to write his own certificate for the last 2 or 3 times, and now and I've got that at the moment with the Mayor's office. I'm concerned, how are we going to make sure that what we have in our academia of compliancing fits with the reality of the cost of living of life?
The cost of consents is quite a concern. That's why we are staying with a predominantly permitted activity regime of setting out standards that people can meet, and they don't need a consent requirement. So as much as possible, we're trying to stay with that and include more systems in that. We acknowledge in the report there will be some systems that go into a consenting regime with going to the references to GDO6. There are things like more considerations of steeper slopes will now need consenting because they need on-site specific assessments by technical experts. So yes, there will be some additional costs for people who now have a consenting regime. Other people will be out of the consenting regime because we're trying to allow for upgrades to new systems, where at the moment someone wants to do an upgrade, they find out how much the consent cost is, and then they just stay with their old system. So we're trying to make those people have a new pathway for carrying over where you've got an old system but you're doing an upgrade, so it is slightly different but has better environmental outcomes. We'll make a new pathway for that. I don't think we can do anything about your certified drain layer person. That's more of an internal process for the consenting team. And for the people that have consenting costs for their reconsenting, this plan change process in itself doesn't really affect the cost of how much it costs to get the technical advice and the consenting process.
Thank you. One small, so thank you. That's encouraging. My comment on the guy with the conflict of interest is just scope creep. I was trying to explain for the purpose of what we're actually looking at, and also the auditing requirements for the owner of the wastewater system. You know, lots of people just have no idea what is. Is there anything being structured where we can have a space for the private sector to be, the actual conduit of connection between the client and council's requirements?
The Safe Septic program is working on that at the moment, where they work with installers and operators and the maintenance people, so that maintenance is done and then records are sent to the council. So it's more of a hands-off. Council just keeps the records and makes sure it's all happening, but isn't going on site and charging for additional site visits by the council. Well, that's already happening under the water quality targeted rate.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lee.
Thank you. My ward, the Hauraki Golf segment of my ward, has a number of distinguishing features, and we just discussed one of those features in the previous item. Another one is septic tanks or on-site wastewater treatment and roof tanks. In the past, the official approach to these on-site wastewater treatment sites have never really been approving. It's always been considered that reticulation is the best way to go, and that on-site treatment is second best, and therefore on-site treatment has never really been discouraged. I don't think that is the right way to go, especially in terms of sustainability. And when you look at this fully reticulated city and you read that most of the beaches are closed or should be closed for swimming or recreation after rain, like 60 red flags, 60 beaches were red flagged last week and 7 with black flags. It's obvious that reticulation is not, if it is affordable, is going to provide all the answers. So my question is the motivation behind this plan change at heart to improve the efficiency of on-site wastewater treatment, or is it to make it harder and more expensive, so to incentivise reticulation? And with reticulation comes development, subdivision, intensification, high-rise and so on. So could we have that assurance that this is to try and make on-site wastewater treatment more efficient and more effective and not more expensive?
Yes, that is definitely the intent of this plan change, to make sure that maintenance and installation is following best practice, and so it's having less environmental effect.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sayers.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. A few questions. So obviously are we trying to with the septic tanks, because there's a lot of septic tanks in the rural area that existing, are we trying to encourage people to move away from those current existing tanks and to upgrade into new technologies? Are we forcing that upon them?
We're definitely not forcing it on them, encouraging it, yes.
And do we know how many septic tanks there are?
We estimate there are 48,000.
Yeah, 48,000 sounds about right. What evidence is there that septic tanks, if they're maintained and working correctly, are polluting waterways?
We know that they can. Where there has been work through the Safe Networks program where there has been investigations and found that the issues at different safe swim sites have been related to on-sites. So we don't have region-wide evidence at the moment of an issue. So that's why we're happy with keeping it as a largely permitted activity regime. Where these systems are installed appropriately for the site and then they are maintained, they have regular clean-outs and service checks, they are a fine and appropriate system.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't think there is a lot of evidence, and they may, and they can pollute a water system if they're not correctly maintained, right? Now the cost question was a very good one. We've got a lot of data in the paper about cost to council, but very little about the cost to the landowners going forward. So I know that to buy one of these new systems is about 40,000. The regulatory costs are the examples of about 70,000. So you're looking about 110,000 in some cases to actually install these devices. So there is a significant cost to landowners, right? And in the rural sector, we've already got many households that are under mental health guidance and getting support from rural agencies. And just this is another financial pressure, and particularly some of them wanting to sell off their land, subdivide a bit off, and the new buyers coming in, they don't realise that suddenly they're up for so much extra cost, you know, to get a house built there. So I think it's a major concern to me. I'll probably direct it to the chair, right, about the cost implications around this whole policy and the lack of evidence that the old septic tanks are polluting the waterways. So I do have a question perhaps with regard to other councils across New Zealand that are perhaps rural orientated. One, we have a neighbour at Kaipara up north, you know, backs onto the Rodney Ward. What other councils are going down this track that we're going down here? Are they doing the same changes?
No, as already noted, our guidance documents are referred to by other councils. They're written for Auckland situations, but they are being used elsewhere in the country as well. Most other councils have a permitted activity regime. Few councils know where all their on-site systems are. It's an issue across New Zealand, and it's been raised by a special subgroup of Water New Zealand. They're advocating to the government to get nationwide standards so that when everyone does freshwater plan changes, they all put the same permitted activity standards in. We're not sure yet how far that will go, but there is talk among the regional councils of trying to get consistent approaches as much as possible. We know there are costs for landowners, and landowners are often quite surprised to find out that there are maintenance requirements in the unitary plan. They've always been there, people just don't know about them, and programs like Safe Septic are making those requirements more obvious to people.
I agree that, you know, it's good that the septic tanks probably have to be checked and reports sent through. The fact that there isn't evidence, and I might bring this up in the debate, Chair, but just for the officers, and I'll try and make this a question. The fact that there isn't, I can't put my hand on and point people towards the evidence that the septic tanks are creating more of a problem than the new systems. So I guess if you can provide that as a way of a question, that'd be helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe I should note this is the first stage of the process in terms of coming to the committee to initiate this work. we have to come back to committee to seek approval to notify a plan change. At that stage, we will have the full Section 32 analysis of the costs and benefits, and we will include more information there about the cost for landowners as well as the cost to council for doing the notification. And we'll also try and, as much as we can, include any evidence we can find about pollution.
Thank you. But I'll come to a question at the end. But Member Ashby and then Councillor Filipina.
Kia ora, thank you for the report. Just two questions from me. The first one, and I'm not sure if it's best to ask you or later on, but how does this, I guess, align with, later on the agenda, item 14, Council's doing a submission. How are these two things, I guess, aligned, or are they aligned? And then the second question is...
Just in case, have you seen item 14? It's the Council Group Permission on Proposed Wastewater Environmental Performance Standards. Yeah, just in case.
Yeah, sorry, yes, thank you, Chair. And the second question is just the cost-benefit analysis notes there's, if there's no improvements, that there would be a cultural cost of not addressing issues that conflict with tikanga. So I suppose that I'm supportive of the approach that you're taking of permitted activity and standards and that. Question is, how do you ensure that tikanga is being built into the standards? So obviously the mixing of wastewater with fresh water where you collect mahinga kai is one example, but another might be a septic field on top of an urupa might be another one. So how are you building, tikanga into the standards?
To go to the first question about the environmental standards from Tamata Arawai, I've been involved in drafting that submission, the planning parts of that process, so I'm aware of what that covers. That relates to point source discharges from publicly owned systems, whereas this report is about on-site systems from individual sites, so can be small wastewater treatment plants, but is generally house-sized lots. So they're almost two different systems covering the whole region. Yep. They will come together in terms of they both work to improve outcomes in the receiving environment. In terms of building tikanga into the standards, maybe we should discuss that as we develop this plan change wording further. That would be quite good to do. I know that TP GDO6 was developed with consultation with mana whenua, so there are aspects there that include it. There are also provisions in Chapter E5 about avoiding sites and places of significance to mana whenua, so that probably won't exclude urupa unless they're already scheduled in the unitary plan in the relevant schedule. It could be taken into account, where they are, but we could do some further work on that as we develop the plan change.
Councillor Filipina.
Kia ora, Chair. Kia ora, kōrua, ladies. I don't know whether this partai is to you or Megan will answer it, but it's under financial implications 51. So when I read the report and it's got option 1 as the highest cost option, I just want to put on record that that's as a result of the additional external cost, isn't it? It's that we as council have to bear.
It's not really, it's additional cost to council because we had already budgeted on spending that in notifying a freshwater plan change, and the freshwater plan change has been pushed out to subsequent years because of what the government's doing with the MPSFM. So it is an external cost in terms of postage and sending out letters to the directly affected properties, and that is a requirement of the wording in the RMA. It's not really a choice that you have to notify those people.
And my last one is on 51, which is central government replacing NPSFM 2020. Has there been any discussions whether be from either you two or Megan. Has there been any discussions around with the government around the release and whether the costs are going to be part of their replacement?
You think the postage costs? Do you mean those costs?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what they're going to do, but according to 51, it's expected in late 2025. So has there been any discussions, whether it be by Megan or anybody else, with officers, with staff from central government around any costs and everything else?
Yeah, the dates mentioned there are to do with when the discussion document on the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management comes out. That's part of phase 2 of the resource management reform. We get to consult on that. Phase 3 comes out later in 2025, and that is the replacement of the RMA with 2 new bills. There will be nothing in the first phase about freshwater to do with notification costs. What that will do, no, we won't go there in terms of that. But phase 3 probably will include some consideration of these costs because it's looking at all sorts of processes under the Act, and I wouldn't be surprised if they bring something in there about avoiding costs like this. If we can do something like get emails off people where people agree to emails not just being for rates notices but also other council purposes, you could reduce the cost quite a lot.
Good way. Kia ora.
Just through the chair, traditionally, of course, as you know, governments tend to put these things on us and we just have to pay the cost of doing that. So we always try and, as Kath has said, try and get reduced costs by perhaps doing it in different ways. But I very much doubt that we're going to get a whole bunch of money from the government to help us to work through these processes over the next few years. It's never happened before, so I can't imagine it's going to happen now.
I just wanted that recorded.
Kia ora. And I think it's, definitely an item that we mention at Select Committee often with all these changes, depending on all governments. Mayor Wayne Brown, and then I'll go back to Councillor Walker.
Okay, thanks for that. I've got a few. I was actually one of the authors of TP 58, and so and at the time we wrote it, we didn't realise it was becoming such a wide Bible for the entire sector. There's a lot of misunderstanding of the difference between treatment and disposal, because the disposal, in fact, it turns out to be more of a problem than the treatment in some ways. So when you get a bit further down here, I'd like to be, before this gets out into the open, perhaps addressed by what the latest format of what options you're going to give the people are. And because I think it'll work well if we have the ability to approve various types of treatment and encourage various types of disposal, because disposal at low pressure under grass irrigation is actually quite a good thing. We did notice in the post-Gabriel storm that poor disposal fields were a trigger for some major collapses, particularly out in the Kari area. This sector is covered from what the treatment system, which we used to call USUM, which stands for out of sight, out of mind. And I remember visiting one house which had completely disappeared down a hill out there, and the guy had no idea that he'd been lubricating the slope underneath his house for many years. And it was all the council's fault, of course, and it was lock drains, but in fact it was just basic on-site monumental stupidity. And so a lot of the failures come from really dumb shit. I didn't mean to, as a poor pun, I'm sorry. So I would like to know that we can have I think your planning approach is correct, and I support that. And when you say the option is the highest financial cost, the option of planning is the highest cost to us. But we need to offer the reasonable cost alternatives to the people, otherwise they will make poor choices, because most people will choose this on what is the minimum we can get away with to build our house and then close their eyes to what's happening. There's some very terrible behaviour of residents in these areas. I remember visiting the residual site in a subdivision. It's quite often utilised by people who have poorly performing soakage fields. And I remember visiting one last site to find that 12 neighbours had connected their failing systems onto this last section, which was now basically an open sewer, really. And so education has to be put alongside the move to this, and it's education at many levels. There are many septic tank cleaning companies who have no real understanding of the business that they're involved in. There are some excellent solutions available out there. I note in here that we've put some blunt instruments like the maximum slopes and things like that there. I mean, you can do this on a very steep slope if someone thinks about it. And so I'm really asking you, can you come back with some of the technical stuff for us to have a bit of a review, those of us who are interested? And we should all be interested here because we are taking downstream problems. And can we ensure that there's some form of public education, possibly funded out of Healthy Waters or somebody else's budget, because it's a lot cheaper to educate people rather than clean up the mess afterwards. And
do you want to just clarify for the Mayor around the education, what's attached to this, and also what the water quality target rate and others are funding as part of this work to help?
I mean, just before you do that, but right at the start, we need to call it on-site treatment and disposal. They're two separate things. And rather than on-site wastewater, you understand what that means. The public don't. There are two problems here, and quite good treatment associated with poor on-site poor disposal is not a good solution. It's actually a worse solution than poor treatment and good on-site disposal. And so I've seen plenty of people who've replaced septic tanks with rather elaborate aerated treatment systems, only to have the disposal fail. And so I'd like to see whether you would like to reword it, on-site treatment and disposal, because they're two separate entities that are required to get a satisfactory function out of this. And I know that I'm giving you a lecture here, but I have to say that as one of the writers of TP58, it was used much more widely than we had expected. And so you'll find if we come up with a good solution here, it also will be much more widely used than we expect, because there are not many good solutions out there. Thank you for that. I'll shut up now, but you can see that this is something which I do know a bit about.
Thank you. The questions. We're happy to call it on-site treatment and disposal. We call it on-site wastewater systems, meaning both together. It does address both.
That's what it means, but they don't get it.
And that's why I asked my question. You know this stuff. Like,
Okay,
it's got to be layman.
could we both all let the officers give some feedback, and then we will...
Asking if we know the planning side of it. We work with people who understand the technical side of it. What we're trying to address is the planning issues that the technical people have been complaining about. In terms of providing you with the technical information, maybe if there is anything in GDO 6 that you want to comment on, you could get back to us on that, because that's what we're relying on, is updating just going to GDO 6 and the current version of that. In terms of the education, the Safe Septic program that is funded by the Water Quality Targeted Rate includes quite a major education component. Thoroughly agree that's a really important part of it. It's not just about getting the right system in the right place, it's about the long-term maintenance, and even when ownership changes, making sure people know what their system, how it operates and what they should be doing to maintain it. and what they allow their neighbours to also go onto the same field, and thoroughly agree with that.
Well, I think that one thing you could possibly add to this is at the appropriate time. I know you're doing planning first up, but at least we want to talk about is that it's helpful to just referring someone to GDO 6. Not everyone can read that. It's like planning. I don't speak planning, but I do speak sewerage, unfortunately. I listen to quite a bit of it as well. But the best, having some good examples is a really good way to do this, and offering a continuously updating list of what treatment options are approved by the council is a good thing as well. There are new entrants coming to this all the time, and there's updates, and there'll be some things that you have on and off, but just asking the people to go out there without offering them some approved selection points won't necessarily produce the planning excellence that you're trying to get from the start. Is that all right?
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
So I've got some further questions, and I just want to thoroughly endorse the questions that the Mayor raised. Like Mayor Brown, I used to interact with Ian Gunn, who was the author of TP58 back in the day, about 30 years ago, whenever it was. So a few quick-fire questions in respect of the people that we consult with. Can we also deal with the people that are, for example, designing eco houses, the tiny home community and the like, because they have a very strong interest in this, because they have to deal with their water and their wastewater. Similarly, on the other issue that the Mayor raised around the naming of this, if you look at the document, yes, it's dealing with treatment, it's dealing with disposal, it's dealing with water conservation, it's dealing with the recycling potentially of grey water and the like. It's much broader and really should be far more enabling across all of those things, because they're all related. And they all go also to the issue that the Mayor raised, where there's a strong interaction between these things and on-site stormwater and the like, and frankly slips and so on in many situations, so we need to be cognizant of that. So I'm just signalling that we might want to look at our labelling of this, our naming of it. The other question I'll just reinforce the Mayor on is really the importance of enabling new technology. So we've got this process of continual update, because that is happening all the time, and certainly we need to be reflective of what's happening in Australia and other jurisdictions where there's a lot of movement here. The other question I've got just really goes to the related issue of auditing requirements. As the Mayor mentioned, there's a difference between treatment and disposal. I'm assuming that the auditing is more around the disposal side than instances where somebody's got a composting toilet that doesn't generate anything in the way of disposal and really doesn't need to be monitored, or for that matter, the water conservation devices that they've got in their home and so on.
Yeah, I think you're probably right there, that most of the auditing and monitoring relates to disposal rather than treatment systems like composting toilets. In some cases, the monitoring would include, is the treatment system still operating, like where it's got solar panels and batteries connected up to a new, more modern system. The maintenance and monitoring would include those systems. But yes, to your other point about the consultation, we can look at including other groups there.
Thank you. And this, when you prepared the plan change, it'll come back to us anyway, right? Yeah. So that's a lot of feedback. I think if you can both step back from the table, we'll go to debate. Thank you for all the work so far, and there's a huge amount ahead. Right, are there any council says?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you to the officers. You know, a septic tank might cost around $3,000. These new tanks, $40,000. compliance costs for these new tanks could be up to $70,000. So looking at 110 grand compared to a $3,000 solution, there's no evidence that I've been convinced of that septic tanks that are well maintained pollute the waterways. Remembering too that all septic tank owners now have to pay for and submit to council that their tanks are being maintained. There's just huge costs in this. You know, a new system costing 40,000, the compliance costs being almost twice that. What this has really done, this has really created mass jobs in both central and local government and enormous costs to ratepayers. And it's not really something that I feel comfortable supporting. Thank you.
Good, Councillor. Thank you. Councillor Turner.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I fully endorse Councillor Sayer's position. Not only is the cost going through the ceiling, but the resilience is going through the floor. These systems are so complicated. There's so much technology in them, coming from, as Councillor Sayer said, an industry which is almost parasitic on the back of the wastewater system. So we need to simplify this. There are straightforward, workable actions, and I don't see in the people I've been helping council open-minded to those things. So yeah, I won't be supporting this either. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Walker.
Well, I'll speak to this very briefly, Mr. Chair, and I agree with the other two speakers. The critical concern that I've got is we should be enabling and working to a situation where we are trying to reduce the costs as much as possible. And that goes to the standardisation issues that the Mayor mentioned. It's critical because in many parts of Auckland it goes to housing affordability, and Councillor Sayers mentioned the cost. It goes to our climate obligations, it goes to sustainability, reducing energy use, reducing water conservation, and vitally, reducing slips and issues in areas that are both slip prone and flood prone. So it is really important. The point I'm making is we need to be as enabling as we can, and we need to be driving costs down. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Henderson.
Yeah, thanks. I'll be brief. Look, I'll be supporting this because it feels like this is kind of the first step. I'm just a little bit confused about this because we're voting on a process here where all of the concerns that we've raised can actually be aired. You know, it's stakeholders is right there in the resolution. So I don't really understand what the issue is. So I'll be voting for it and wait to see what comes back, and then I'll decide from there. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor. Mayor Brown.
Now, I'll be supporting this. It is the first step in a journey that needs to be gone. And there are sometimes you just have to say no. There are about 5 houses I saw out at Cape Kerikeri. They should have said no, and that would have forced them into doing something jointly. There are some sections which are just, some places which are not suitable for that, but there are alternatives. I mean, we have, this is one area where the city doesn't lead this because this has been a bit on the outside of the main city. Most of the city is reticulated, but rural areas are a bit ahead of us in this particular field. But there are some situations where you can link a number of septic tanks and treat the actual effluent from that at a local place. We have to have the ability to offer something which is perhaps intelligent, but I think this has to be part of what we're stepping forward here, planning for a starter to realise it is an issue. And I think if you've got people who've got huge compliance costs, then that's their own fault. They haven't read what the stories are, the rules are, because there's plenty of solutions out there. And so I will definitely be supporting this.
Thank you. Yes, this is just the first step in a long process, but it also is putting into play what is already required and the standards already say. So All of the points that everyone has brought to the table will be considered through the process, and then we'll go to the much larger plan change process anyway, when the public have quite a significant amount of say and to and fro. Right, all those in favour? Any opposed?
And opposed, Chair, if that
So-
could be noted as well.
Councillor Sayers, Councillor Turner opposed, and Councillor Fletcher would like to abstain. Thank you. Right, we'll move to item 10, which is an operative plan change, and after this item, we'll go to lunch. I didn't look at that clock because there's so many other clocks around me, but we'll get that changed.
Just, if you thought it was lunch, would be glad to do it.
Yeah, I haven't looked at that clock for years. John, thank you.
Kia ora koutou. Process with which you're very familiar. It's the end of a plan change. This one is a private plan change, not a council plan change. A very narrow, discrete plan change to rezone land in Beach Haven from single house, which is a low density residential zone, to the mixed housing urban 3-storey medium density zone. Interestingly, under plan change 78, this property is proposed to be rezoned anyway, but the private plan change is proceeding ahead of that. It's had its hearing, submissions, there are no appeals, no significant controversial issues with this one, although there was community interest and some opposition during the hearings process. But we are seeking that you approve the plan change and enable us to make it operative. I'm happy to take any questions.
I'm happy to
Councillor
move. I'm happy to move, Chair.
Councillor Henderson Leone, thank you. Is there any questions on this? As we know, with the operative, it's the end of a long process.
Why do these come back here? Why do they actually need the approval here when we've delegated authority?
Through the Chair, there is no ability under the Resource Management Act to delegate making a plan change operative to staff. It's probably the one clause in the RMA that says it must be a decision, I think, of a committee of the whole, as opposed to, it's the one thing that you can't delegate to staff. Yeah, Karina's nodding. One clause, it's a, just fact of the RMA.
That's okay.
Okay.
Thanks, John. Yeah, I think we have traversed that interesting piece of information before. Doesn't seem to be any other questions. Right, all those in favour? Any opposed? Perfect. Right, we'll take the opportunity, and sorry to the staff who are waiting. We'll have half an hour, so we'll come back at 1:05, shall we say. Thank you.